My name is Delaney Brooks. I'm 34. The morning of my heart surgery, my parents promised me, "We'll be there before they take you in." I believed them. I sat in a hospital gown, alone, watching the door. They never came. Instead, they attended my brother's housewarming party. 3 months later, they showed up on my porch crying, holding papers they were never supposed to see. Because the house they celebrated that day had been bought with money my late husband left to keep me alive. Heart surgery changes how you hear promises. Every word feels heavier. My mom squeezed my hand. "We'll be there." Dad nodded. "Nothing's keeping us away." I actually felt relieved. For the first time in weeks. I should have known better. 2 years earlier, I buried my husband, Ethan. Before he died, he created a medical fund. Just for me. Just in case my condition got worse. "Promise me you'll use it." I promised. That money represented safety, hope, love. I didn't know it yet, but someone else had plans for it. At 6:12 a.m., I called Mom. No answer. Strange. At 6:18, I called Dad. Straight to voicemail. Because both had spent weeks promising support. I told myself not to panic. People get delayed. People get stuck in traffic. I was wrong. My brother Kyle was the golden child. Always had been. Mom called him ambitious. Dad called him driven. Everyone else called him lucky. Kyle had just bought his first house. A giant house. Far beyond what I thought he could afford. That mattered later. A lot later. The nurse checked my chart. "Family coming?" I smiled. "They're on the way." The lie hurt. Because even then, part of me knew something was off. The nurse squeezed my shoulder. Kindness from strangers hits differently when family disappears. While waiting, I opened social media. Big mistake. Kyle's housewarming. Champagne glasses, balloons, family photos, Mom smiling, Dad smiling, everyone smiling. Timestamp, 22 minutes earlier. My stomach dropped. Because they weren't late. They chose somewhere else. The photo caption read, "Family first, proud of our son." I stared at those words. Family first. Interesting choice. Because their daughter was sitting in a cardiac unit, waiting to be wheeled into surgery. That didn't count. I texted Mom. Just 3 words. "Where are you?" Read immediately. No response. Because silence after being caught always means something. If someone made a promise during your hardest moment and broke it, comment, "I remember." A nurse named Rachel sat beside me. She noticed my face. "You okay?" I almost laughed. No, I wasn't okay. But strangers can only help so much. Then she said, "We'll take good care of you." She did. More than my family. They started wheeling me toward surgery. I kept looking back. Still expecting my parents. Still hoping. Still stupid enough to believe. The doors closed. No Mom. No Dad. No family. Just me. And that was the moment something inside me changed. When I woke up, everything hurt. Chest, throat, back. Even breathing felt expensive. The first thing I did? Look toward the visitor chair. Empty. Because even after surgery, part of me still expected them. That hope died slowly. Rachel was there. Not my parents. Not Kyle. Rachel. She smiled. "Surgery went well?" I started crying immediately. Not because of pain, because a stranger delivered more comfort than my family. That realization hurt worse. 3 hours later, Mom texted. "How are you feeling?" That was it. No apology, no explanation, nothing. I stared at the screen, then at Kyle's party photos. Interesting timing, because apparently now she had time. I called her. Immediately. "Why weren't you there?" Silence. Then, "Kyle needed us." Just like that. No pretending. No traffic excuse. No emergency. Just preference. They chose him. openly. Mom actually sounded annoyed. His first house only happens once. Because heart surgery also tends to happen once, at least if everything goes well. I laughed. Dark laugh. Wrong reaction. Mom got defensive instantly. That told me everything. Dad finally got on the phone. Voice careful. Your mother and I discussed it. Discussed it. Interesting word. Meaning there was a decision. A conscious decision. They weighed options. Compared events. Then picked Kyle. And somehow, that hurt more. Later that night, I watched a video someone posted. Kyle giving a toast. Mom crying proudly. Dad hugging him. Applause. Champagne. Family. Because while they celebrated a house, I was learning how to sit up without tearing stitches. Kyle finally messaged me. Hope surgery went okay? Hope? Then, Mom said it wasn't that serious. There it was. The first real clue. Someone had minimized my condition, deliberately, and I suddenly wanted to know who. If someone rewrote your pain to make themselves feel better, comment, I see it now. 4 days later, I went home. No balloons, no flowers, no family waiting, just silence. And Ethan's old picture on the bookshelf. I sat there for hours, thinking, remembering, connecting things, because something wasn't adding up. Not emotionally, financially. 1 week later, my hospital billing office called. Routine conversation. At least I thought so. Then the woman said, Ms. Brooks, we're calling regarding the payment issue. I froze. What payment issue? Silence. Then, the transfer from your medical fund was rejected. Boom. My entire body went cold, because that fund was supposed to cover everything. The story became much bigger than a missed surgery. I asked the billing specialist to repeat herself. Slowly. The transfer from your medical fund failed. Impossible. Ethan's fund had always been stable, protected, carefully managed. That was the whole point. Then she added, the balance appears significantly lower than expected. My pulse spiked, because now, this wasn't clerical. Something had happened. The next morning, I pulled out Ethan's binder. Everything was there. Insurance, estate papers, medical directives, then the account information. And one detail I hadn't thought about in years. A secondary authorized signer. My father. Dad had access. Back then, it made sense. I was sick. Ethan worried. If anything happens, your dad can help. Simple, reasonable, trusted. I never questioned it. Why would I? The problem with trust is that you never notice it disappearing until it's gone. I called the bank, spent 40 minutes verifying identity. Then the representative read transaction history. My stomach dropped. Large withdrawal, 2 weeks before surgery, 6 figures. I nearly dropped the phone, because that wasn't possible. I never approved it. Do you have the transfer description? The banker paused, then read it. Temporary family loan. The room spun. Temporary. Family. Loan. 3 words. All wrong. Because I never loaned anyone anything. Especially not surgery money. Then I heard the number. Again. Slowly. Kyle's house made sense. The down payment. The timing. The celebration. The giant mortgage. Everything. Because my brother didn't buy that house alone. Someone helped. A lot. I called Mom immediately. What did Dad take from my account? Silence. Long silence. Not confusion. Not shock. Silence. Then, your brother was in a difficult position. Confession. Straight confession. I understood. Mom rushed to explain. Kyle said your surgery was routine. There it was. He said the money was just sitting there. I laughed. Actually laughed. The account keeping me alive was now considered unused money. That hurt. Deeply. If someone treated your emergency fund like their opportunity fund, comment, not your money. Dad called an hour later, voice shaking. We meant to replace it. Classic. Always classic. People stealing money love future tense promises. I asked one question. Before surgery? Silence. Then, no. Exactly. Because replacement was never the plan. Hope was the plan. 3 months passed. Recovery improved. My calls stopped. Their calls slowed. Distance settled in. Then one rainy Thursday evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it. Mom was crying. Dad looked terrified. And in Dad's hands, a stack of legal papers I never expected to see. The housewarming party was finally sending them the bill. I stared at the foreclosure notice, then at my parents, then back at the notice. Because 3 months earlier, they couldn't make time for my surgery. They found my address, my schedule, and my front porch. Funny how urgency works when it's your crisis, not mine. Mom started crying immediately. Real tears, big tears, messy tears. Delaney, please. No greeting. No. How are you feeling? No. How's recovery? Just please. Because apparently my health mattered less than Kyle's mortgage. Again. Dad handed me more paperwork. Bank correspondence, loan review notices, compliance requests. Then I saw the phrase, source of funds verification. The lender had started asking questions. Questions Kyle couldn't answer. Questions my parents couldn't answer. Because stolen money leaves trails. His mortgage is frozen. Mom's voice cracked. I nodded. Good. What does that have to do with me? Silence. Beautiful silence. Because they hated saying it out loud. Then Dad whispered, we need your help. There it was. Finally. Honesty. Dad slid another document across the table. I didn't touch it. Interesting. Because I already knew. I knew exactly what was coming. Then he said, if you sign this, pause. Everything goes away. There it was. The ask. The real reason they came. I picked up the paper. Gift declaration, simple language, dangerous consequences. It claimed I voluntarily gave Kyle the money because I was literally recovering from surgery when the transfer happened. Mom grabbed my hand. Please. Wrong move. Very wrong move. I remembered waking up alone. The memory hit hard. Hospital ceiling, chest pain, empty chair, no family, no parents, no brother. Just Rachel the nurse. Interesting timing, because now the people who abandoned me needed rescuing. Life has a sense of humor. Dad looked exhausted. We thought we'd fix it. Classic. Future tense accountability. I asked, when? Silence. Then, Kyle was going to refinance. Another future plan. Another imaginary solution. Nobody ever intended to ask me. They intended to survive me. If family only remembers you exist when they need something, like this video, subscribe and comment. Too late. Chapter 39. The Family Dinner. 2 days later, Kyle called. Family dinner. Not invitation, instruction. I almost declined. Then changed my mind, because pressure creates mistakes. And I wanted answers. Every single one. That Sunday, everyone was there. Mom, Dad, Kyle, his wife Madison, even 2 cousins. Audience. They wanted witnesses, public pressure, family guilt. Instead, I brought a folder. And nobody noticed. Yet. The moment everyone sat down, Kyle began. Interesting. No apology. No accountability. Just, Delaney, you're blowing this out of proportion. Classic golden child strategy. Minimize, deflect, rewrite. I smiled. Because tonight, I brought paperwork. And paperwork doesn't care about feelings. Mom started crying. Again. Please don't destroy your brother's future. Interesting sentence. Because nobody worried about my future before surgery. Nobody worried about my heart. Nobody worried about my recovery. Yet somehow, Kyle's house had become the family emergency. I noticed even Madison looked uncomfortable. That mattered. Dad pushed the document toward me. Just sign. 3 words. Simple. Ugly. I stared at him, then asked, "Did you sign anything before taking my money?" Silence. Direct hit. Because suddenly, consent mattered, and nobody at that table had it. Unexpectedly, Madison looked at Kyle. Wait. Very interesting. What exactly did Delaney know? Kyle froze. Mom froze. Dad froze. I realized something. Madison had been lied to, too. I opened my folder. Slowly, hospital records, bank statements, transfer confirmations, recovery paperwork. The room got quiet. Good. Then I laid everything across the table. One document at a time. Nobody spoke. Because evidence has a different energy than accusations. I looked directly at Kyle, then at Mom, then Dad, and finally said, "You didn't miss my surgery for your son's housewarming." Silence. Pure silence. Then I slid the transfer records forward. While I was being wheeled into heart surgery, you were celebrating a house paid for with the money meant to keep me alive. The entire table froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And for the first time, nobody had a defense. Madison picked up the paperwork, read every page. Slowly, her face changed. Then she looked at Kyle. "What did you do?" Not, "What happened?" Not, "Explain. What did you do?" Because she already knew. Kyle had crossed a line, a huge one. Dad's voice cracked. "Please." Mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. Then I finally answered. "No." One word. That's all. No speeches, no drama, no guilt. Just no. Because the day I needed them, they already made their choice. Now I was making mine. If someone expected forgiveness without accountability, subscribe and comment. No is a complete sentence. The investigation continued. I never signed. The lender reopened the file. The unauthorized withdrawal became impossible to ignore. 3 months later, Kyle lost the house. Madison moved into a rental. Dad was removed from every financial authorization connected to me. And Mom? She finally stopped calling every day. Interesting how consequences create boundaries. It's been almost a year now. My heart is stronger. Recovery is complete. The scars faded. Mostly. Kyle rents a small townhouse now. Mom and Dad still leave voicemails. I rarely listen. Sometimes I think about that hospital hallway, the empty chair, the closed surgery doors. The moment I realized I was alone. But I wasn't really alone. I still had myself. And that turned out to be enough. Because the day I needed my family, they chose a house. The day I needed my family, they chose a house. The day they needed me, I chose my life.